Debate. The Honourable Member for Etobicoke North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me begin by thanking the good people of Etobicoke North, the beautiful community where I was raised, and for the privilege of serving them. I hope our community members know that our constituency office is their home and that we are always here to celebrate the good times and to provide support during the challenging times. Mr. Speaker, I will not be supporting the budget, as it gives the most help to Canadians who need it the least. The Conservative Party's proposals will benefit the rich on the backs of the middle class, and that is simply not fair. For example, the Conservatives' priority is a $2 billion tax break for the rich. What's more, the Conservatives are doubling the TFSA limit by taking away tens of thousands of dollars in old age security for seniors. In the long term, doubling the TFSA will help the rich and do nothing for the middle class. Mr. Speaker, our Etobicoke North community needs jobs. I have worked hard to get a $500,000 job program and to help my constituents find jobs they need to support their families. I personally review resumes, often doing 2 and 3 drafts. I get people into job programs. We follow up with them to see if the program is meeting their needs, and we provide other necessary supports such as clothing and food programs. But finding jobs in this economic climate is not easy. Unemployment last year, including youth unemployment, was still higher than before the recession. In fact, according to CIBC, job quality in Canada is at its lowest in a quarter century. For the past 16 months, job growth has been under 1%, the first time this has occurred outside of a recession in 4 decades. Mr. Speaker, over the past year, close to 80% of the people I've seen need a job. Many are youth with bachelor's, master's, nursing and law degrees. Some have been out of school with no work for 2 years, despite spending each day sending out resumes. Many are internationally trained professionals, and some are people who have been downsized after working 20 years for one company. They are good people with good skills, and they would be an asset to any organization, but they are struggling. In some cases, they cannot feed their children. In some cases, they cannot buy their medications for diabetes, heart disease, and multiple sclerosis. And in some cases, they cannot pay for their children's dental care. We do the best we can to help. Mr. Speaker, I have already heard from our youth looking for jobs. They want the Conservative government to know that $7 million to, quote, support the relocation of youth and immigrants to areas where job opportunities exist is, in their words, inexcusable. Perhaps the government is unaware that youth unemployment rate in Ontario stands at 20%, and that 1 in 5 young Torontonians cannot find a job. They also want the government to know that they would like to have the opportunity to stay in their community, to get a job and work, and to be near family if they choose. They should not be forced to look elsewhere. They also ask where the government understands the gridlock and lack of transit in Toronto, and that it can take 2 hours to commute from our community to the downtown core for a job. Mr. Speaker, they see through why there will be no new investment in community infrastructure for 2 more years, even when cities are calling for help today. Mr. Speaker, our Etobicoke North community and Canada deserve a better plan, investing in jobs and growth for the middle class and those working hard to join it. Mr. Speaker, I will now turn my attention to 2 of my critics' roles, namely international development and status of women, and what was not in the budget. I will begin with international development. According to a new study by Engineers Without Borders, 94% of Canadians say it is important to improve the health, education, and economic opportunity for the world's poorest people. After reviewing the budget, One humanitarian responded with, quote, "Was there development in the budget?" Mr. Speaker, the Conservative government is once again balancing their budget on the backs of the world's poorest. Liberals believe that development assistance must help reduce systemic poverty by stimulating the creation of democratic institutions, economic opportunity, and job growth. The government has announced a Development Financing Initiative, or DFI. DFIs work with the private sector to promote development and investment in developing countries. While DFIs can be effective in job creation, which is a massive need for developing countries seeking economic progress and stability, these institutions must be managed properly in order to ensure that development outcomes are prioritized. Mr. Speaker, I have several questions about this new organization. First, where is the money coming from? According to the OECD, Canada's aid spending dropped to 0.24% of GDP in 2014, down from 0.27% the previous year, one of the country's lowest rates in more than a decade. It is very important that the DFI be funded with new money and not from the current Overseas Development Aid, or ODA, budget. Will the Minister of International Development and La Francophonie look elsewhere for funds? And when will funding start? A decrease in ODA spending is not the only worrying trends I see with this budget on the topic of international development. The Conservative government has shifted its aid priorities to reflect its commercial and political interests to the detriment of the poorest and most fragile countries where local capital is limited and short-term risks are too high for banks or other investors. Mr. Speaker, the last issue I will address is what is in the budget for women. The budget focuses on women entrepreneurs and women on boards. These are important issues. I have many questions related to the government's proposals, which I will table as a written question to the government. But the major question is, why is there no money attached to the action plan for women in business? Mr. Speaker, last night I attended a fundraiser for our local women's shelter, Ernestine's, which daily undertakes life-saving work and is a refuge and a touchstone in our Etobicoke North community. Men and women attending the fundraiser wanted to know what was in the budget for ending violence against women and girls. They were clear that we need a national action plan to end violence and that we need an inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women. They do not accept the government's roundtable on missing and murdered Indigenous women as sufficient or acceptable, and they asked me to bring this up today. They also asked that I discuss the Canadian Network of Women's Shelters and Transition Houses' latest report that shows in just one day, 231 shelters welcome 122 new women and 81 children, but they had to turn away 302 women and 221 women due to a lack of resources. Moreover, only 20% of shelters said that they felt, quote, well-equipped to help women with mental health concerns, and only 31% said they could help women with substance abuse concerns. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to raise concerns I have heard from our Etobicoke North community concerning jobs, economic growth, lack of infrastructure, and lack of real help in the budget, and for the opportunity to raise concerns of stakeholders regarding international development and women and men who support Ernestine's and want the violence to end. Mr. Speaker, I cannot support this budget because it fails our communities and it fails Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.